It's in first reading. We can. Is this? I'm here.
Finance committee will come to order. So we have. First, order of business is going to be legislative update. We have this today. Legislative update.
Good evening, Finance Committee Chair, Board Chair, Board members. Thank you all for coming to our legislative update this evening. This is our first look at things that we've been working on as we've been gathering data from departments and the schools and working with leadership. Again, this is an early look because fortunately we haven't gotten any numbers yet from the state, unfortunately. But they told us that by the end of this week, we'll get something, so we're very hopeful. But we're still doing a lot of behind the scenes work to put our numbers together. So
I felt a little, but there.
So we'll just go a little bit through the state budget process for this current year for FY25 budget. The 24-25 executive budget was proposed late January by Governor McMaster. And then the state education superintendent Weaver presented her budget priorities to the House Ways and Means K-12 subcommittee in early February. Some of the governor's focal points that he presented are to rework the statewide minimum teacher salary schedule. So he proposed to increase the minimum salary to 45,000. So we know we at least have to go to 45,000 for space. That's what we were talking about earlier. And also to collapse the education level categories to be only bachelor's and then master's and above. It's the second column, and that's it. Little. So the columns that he proposed to use were just bachelor's, and then masters, and everybody above masters would be on the same pay scale.
Good question. Just because my brain was realized. The minimum 45,000, that's not past the, or is it the government?
No, nothing.
He's just
That was
making
his
it
proposal.
Yeah, legislative.
It's got a lot
Yeah,
of,
it is.
time to go through, so. He also talked about banding steps into 3-year increments. So 0, 1, and 2 would be one amount. 3, 4, and 5 would be another amount. So it's very different from what we're working with now with the different steps. As you get another year of experience, you go to another step, but that's not in his proposal. Currently, the state minimum starting salary is 42.5, and we are at 43.5. So right now, as it stands, the governor has proposed a $2,500 increase on each step of the scale. Another one of his focal points is to begin modernizing teacher pay towards a career ladder in critical needs subject areas. So to provide additional funding for them. Also to provide a bus driver supplement of $2,500 for each driver. And that would be paid out in 3 installments. And then, and these are just the highlights. There are many other things. We're just grabbing the fun highlights. So also to increase the teacher's supply allocation from $350 check that they currently get to $400. And that would be all paid for by the state. They
I was just gonna ask that.
They cover 100% of the teacher supply check.
What about the rest of the proposals? Did it pass and not be covered by the state? Just highlight.
So like what I was reading about, it said something about we would have some autonomy in deciding how we want to divide it up.
Yes, in that proposal, yes.
Yes.
So let's go on to the next. Let me tell you what came out of the
Okay.
House with. Sorry, Amy.
Okay.
Which one do you want? I think the previous one, that one.
So after the governor's proposal, it went to the House Ways and Means Committee. Now the House Ways and Means, they finalized their budget recommendations on February 21st. So their proposed statewide minimum teacher salary schedule would move the beginning salary to 47,000 So that's an increase of $4,500
On the minimum.
on the minimum, that's right. Right, not on ours, because we're currently at 43,500. So on the Ways and Means, budget recommendation, they chose not to collapse the education levels, so we would still have bachelor's was 18, master's was 30 in the doctorate, so to keep them, and to also keep the steps in place. And to increase the steps for the years of experience from 23 to 28. Did that answer your question a little bit?
Well, so I guess my question is more that from what I was reading, all of the increases are more at newer, early teachers who are just starting and have been there for less than 5 years. But there's money that could be distributed elsewhere, but the districts have autonomy in deciding that. Is that, you see what I'm asking?
Within each band,
Yes.
you could do a different amount in each band.
Right. They're not telling us exactly how much we have to do each week. That could be different across the state. That's what I was.
Okay, so you're saying you would only see the increase of the several thousand at the first minimum salary, but.
Well, that's the same, right, for
It'd
every,
be determinant on like if you're a higher step, what that increase is.
yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because it's, I mean, some of the steps, some of the increases are very, very small, but that could be changed. Right? Is that, I'm asking, because I wasn't really sure when I was reading it. That's what it sounded like.
So it depends on what they end up adopting.
Okay, well,
If
yes,
it's not
obviously.
the governor's version with the banding, yes, there's flexibility within there as long as you're at the minimum for that band.
Okay,
With the Ways and Means, it's a traditional looking salary schedule. We would have to hit at least a minimum for each cell on the
and
schedule.
it'd be the same across the whole state?
The minimum.
Minimum.
The minimum,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Okay, yes.
So how
That's
does
what I
that
meant.
affect each?
But with the governors, it's not, right? Or it is?
It still is, but again, because of local, additions that the other districts have that we've been.
Well, I know people are gonna pay different, but I'm just looking at like the minimum, I guess. That,
I think it's still the minimum per each band.
okay,
But it's a band, and I will say, and I wasn't at their meeting, but this will be extraordinarily outside of the box for any state in the United States to look at bands. Because, you know, especially when you look at states that are bargained collectively, then they have steps. Because what you're doing is you're putting the COIA into the step. And so for us to look at a band, and I'm not saying it's wrong, that is more the business model, but it will be, we would be one of the first states, in my opinion, to adopt that type of approach to a salary schedule. I've never seen it done before. So my point to say that is, I don't know if that's what we'll end up seeing versus we're gonna see a salary schedule still with an increased number of steps added to it, which we already do here, and with increased monies at each step, which we already do. So whenever we see what they offer, we have to go ahead and add extra into it, because if not, then we've just fallen behind.
Does each step move up the same amount?
It's,
It doesn't.
I'm saying like, will it increase? Okay, yeah, no, it doesn't now, I guess.
typically in a lot of scales, like my last scale, it was a 1.8% increase every, from
Yeah,
each step.
So like,
Yeah.
if we move, like, have to increase 1.8% to get to that minimum, will we increase that percent for each?
That's what I'm saying, then we would,
We're not exactly certain yet what'll come out, because in the past, we've done it both ways, so that
Yeah.
kind of makes the
Percent
scale a
an
little bit.
amount.
So it's not the
Okay.
same percentage amount. So some years we've given a flat $2,500 to every cell. And then the higher you get, that percentage gets smaller.
Smaller, yeah. So what would we, you don't know what we would do, whether we do a percent or and a set amount. To me, it sounds like a percent would be a fair way of
the
doing it,
problem with the.
but I know that it could get crazy when we get up high.
Yeah, exactly, that's it. So the problem with the percent is what you're doing is we already have, what are we at, 28? So you already have 28 steps. So if you do a percent, the step up here is going to get more than the step here. What you've done is you're you're creating a bigger gap for salary levels. And then again, from the state's perspective and from a business perspective, you know, at what level have you achieved, you know, your greatest level of efficacy?
Right.
You know, and so the reason we stretched it out is because we know people have to work that long to get to retirement. So making sure that they have the COA in that step, more so than brand efficacy.
Okay, I understand that.
Well, that 23 to 28 has always been a problem because the longer we're in service, technically you say you're no longer as important to us. That's the way academically teachers, we take it. And so I have an issue with that. That's sort of like saying, go work somewhere else.
The state stopped their scales at 23, but we've been at 28. So we've been there.
And that's why we had to fund that, like above those scales, right, Edward?
Yeah, that's,
Not
yeah, not all of it. but-
Right.
portion of it.
And then the other issue is, and I know we need bus drivers, but then the others that are just as important, they are not seeing those $2,500 bonuses that the state is automatically wanting to give to the bus drivers. So I just think you set up a situation where folks will feel as though they're unappreciated.
Like our TAs,
All of
like
them,
that. Do we have?
secretaries, whatever it might be, unless you're showing that you care about each and every group, then you're going to have some people decide it's not worth it to be in South Carolina. Not necessarily DD2, but in South Carolina. And they wonder why we don't make better strides than we do. That's part of the reason.
Interesting.
So just to clarify, I know you couldn't present, but so every pay scale will increase some though. I mean, every different scale will increase some, no matter what. Is that?
On the teacher scale?
Yes, yes. Okay, all right. Guess that's where I was confused. Okay.
Is it only
But
the
between
teacher scale?
23 and 28.
No, I have. I was, no, but I'm talking about for the plan for this one. I thought I had read something that was saying it.
And we've been doing the flat amount because then every teacher gets the same amount.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so help me to understand, maybe I'm not seeing. So between 23 and 28, you get no increase.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that.
No,
No, our
that's-
scale goes to 28.
We
Our
go
scale
to
already-
28.
Oh, okay.
State stops
So
at
every scale should get some increase. The
Up to
question is just how
28.
much, and that's what's gonna be up to.
So if they work for 30 years, they still get that 28.
But if we raise the scale by $2,500, then they'll recognize a $2,500 increase because they had stopped at 28, now 28 higher.
I just think you gotta give them something to nibble, other than that, they go to another pasture.
Are we taking into consideration if we are going to increase all the teacher salaries, then looking, I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to look into like the TAs, we're gonna have to look into,
We really focused on the TAs last year
and
and the full-time adult supports. We're really good on them. So we were trying to take different parts of the salary study and work on them. So nursing needs to
you know,
be.
that's a big one.
I think
It's like our media assistants. Oh, sorry, okay, go ahead.
Because you're so excited.
She has lots of
like,
questions,
let
which are
it
good.
go.
Hey, I'm happy with the,
No, nothing.
So here's some good news. The South Carolina Board of Economic Advisors have forecasted lawmakers would have $776 million in additional recurring revenues for the budget season. And 896 million more in additional non-recurring revenue available to. Do you think it'll happen?
I don't know.
So again, we're very early in the process, but the full House started their budget deliberations today, so that's supposed to happen through this week. Senate budget subcommittees and provisos are meeting from March 19th through April 4th, so they'll be talking. Full Senate Finance Committee budget deliberations are after that, the 9th through the 11th. Senate floor debate is in late April, Then the conference committee gets together late April, early May, because after it goes to the Senate, then the House gets to rebut, and hopefully we can get some more money out of the House. So even though they say, we're not gonna need this, we're not gonna need this, there is a House bill out there, number 4720, for a continuing resolution in case the budget's not passed, so that we can continue with our July 1 operations. We'll still have y'all pass the budget here with the same dollars. We can't do a continuing resolution like what the state does, but we'll still adopt the budget. Here we are. And then go back. That's what we had to do during COVID.
Retro.
So we. Okay.
So the big pot of money that is allocated for K-12 is the state aided classroom allocation. So the executive budget request for funds to be appropriated by the state aided classroom appropriate represents the state's contribution for direct instruction of students in K-12. So this is 75% of the cost of a salary and employer contribution costs of funding one teacher, and I put that in quotes because I have a definition down on that slide, for every 11.23 students. So in the prior year, the formula contained 11.2 instead of 0.23. We reduced that, so we reduced that ratio just a little bit. And the cost of the teacher with a salary of $57,904 for the current fiscal year, including fringe benefits of $18,854 for a total of $76,758. So these numbers go into a big formula, and I will say that that amount has gone up. So the 57,904 last year was 5104, but that represented masters in 12 years. So they decided to take out that piece of the formula to where there's no reference to STEP or education. It's just an arbitrary number that they get to use in their calculation. So they'll take all of that and take the ratio for the number of teachers needed. This is what my quote was for the teacher. Number of teachers needed to serve an estimated number of students on that of the average daily membership based on the prescribed ratio that we were talking about with the 11.23 and the 76,758. So it doesn't just mean teachers in the classroom. It's classroom teachers, librarians, guidance counselors, psychologists, school nurses, etc. It's the whole group of folks who are needed to educate the child. So the percentage that they use is the percentage of district weighted pupil units as a percentage of the total weighted pupil units in the state. So we don't know right this very second what our ratio would be. We do know that the total weighted pupil units in the state is 1,176,712. That's a lot. Last year, our percentage was 3.12%. That's how many students DD2 had of the whole weighted pupil units. District. So just to kind of put those numbers into what we are looking at right now today, on the 45th today, sorry, not today, this in October, we had our official 45th day count, and we were at 25,754 students, which was an increase of 380 students from 135th day. However, the actual count, which includes the PK3 and PK4, because those are students that are in our buildings, we're right now, pardon me, at the 45th day, we were at 26,503. Which was an increase of 458. And I did not pull the numbers today to see what our actual was. Do that for the next one. The next presentation. So
No, sorry, just to clarify. So that's what it's going to be based on, the actual count?
no, it'll actually be the weighted pupil units. We don't have that number from the state yet. That'll be part of our, when we get our allocation.
Yeah.
They'll tell us what our actual weighted pupil units are as a percentage of the total. We know what the total is, but then when they calculate it
But I
out,
mean, that's the total they're going to use. Or for us?
not for us.
No.
They'll use the weighted, which is more because we have weighted student size for
Okay, I got you.
students with disabilities.
Yes, okay.
K.
Okay.
So various provisos that are being deliberated at the State House right now are proviso 1.70. It's the southeastern average teacher salary is at 59,866. So we've been using that number when we're calculating additional FTEs for teachers. We're using $60,000 as base. we're using for our benefits to Lisa, budget. 35%, 34% on top of that for benefits. It's a lot. Also proviso 108.6 is an increase in employer portion for health insurance. So it's not going to be to the employees, but the employer they pay an additional 11.8%. Get some more funding for that.
So is that to reduce the employees or to reduce the state's costs? What's the purpose?
It's just to help pay for the increased cost of health insurance. But not for the.
But they won't, that it won't make the employees portion go down.
Wow. That's a
Well,
significant increase.
And again, when, you know, if this was a bargaining scenario, that has to be considered. That is one of the perks that we have for educators in South Carolina, because their cost isn't going up and the state's cost is going up. So
That's good. Perfect for us.
yeah.
Maybe we can put that on our FAQs. So here's a confusing one that I just wanted to point out because, speaking of bus drivers, so in proviso 117.142, the state is talking about under their general fund employee compensation to increase for state employees. So it's a flat $1,000 if you're under 66,000 and it's 1.5% if you're above it. We are not state employees with DD2. We're not state employees. The part of this proviso that relates to us as school districts is that bus drivers will receive a 1.5% increase over the state minimum scale. So we are well over the state minimum scale. I think we are $6 over the minimum scale. So 1.5% increase is more in line with what we give our other folks, which is usually about a 2% for a step for increase, and also COLA. Trying to build in COLA as well. But last year, there was a huge push to help bus drivers. So they got a 25% increase on the minimum state scale. So. There's also proviso 1.103, which is an anti-bullying safety proviso. This is to prohibit students' use of phones during instructional time. There are some other districts who have already implemented such items as
Yonder Pouch.
Yonder Pouch. That's what I remember the name of it. So, yeah. So if that's something that we wanted to consider, we would need to put that cost in. So I don't know if that's a direct, that's a.
I've talked to the board about this and we're actually, our safety task force that really right now includes our 3 high school principals, myself, Mr. Farrell, Dr. Wilson, are you on that? We start talking about, you know, the different solutions and possibilities, and the Yonder Pouch is definitely one of them.
This potentially provide funding to purchase them.
Unfortunately, proviso with no money.
Love it.
No, but I will say this, if it's something that we pilot and we like, at least it's in the proviso to support our approach to looking at it, you know? So, I mean, it is good for us to have. Of course, it's a unfunded mandate, but
Well, it doesn't say you have to use Yonder vouchers. You can just, you know.
Are we looking at other options or?
there's another, I actually had a vendor reach out to me. It's a little cheaper than the Yonder Pouch. And it's actually a clear case. So you can, you know, like the Yonder Pouch, you can't even see it. And it blocks. This is more like, how do I describe this?
Water, like when you're swimming, you know?
Kinda, you know, like anymore, if you go buy a cartridge for your print cartridge, there's the lock on it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So it has that now. The Yonder Pouch is a little easier because if you do it in the classroom, they've got the unlock key on the wall and you just going out the
Oh, I
door.
like that.
This one you have to physically do it.
I think the clear thing is, unless the students are setting them down somewhere, they're still gonna be like looking through the clear thing at their.
They're just a lot, I will say they're just a lot cheaper is probably the reason.
Is there like something that is centralized? I know like in a smaller school that I subbed in, not in our district, they had they had homeroom. So
Yeah,
homeroom, they would check their phones in homeroom, and then you would go get them at the end of the day, and they were in like a secure
Yeah.
thing that was
Yeah.
monitored, and you could go at lunch and check them out,
Yep.
but then
But
you
we
had to
don't
check.
go
them
to
in.
home in high school.
Yeah, so we don't do homeroom, so I don't know how you
Or
would
middle
enforce
school.
that, but if there's something, like, can we look at possibly something like that, where you check in?
I mean, there's no way to
Attendance
do it
that
without
way.
having something, physical thing. You have to have something. You can't just say no cell phones.
I mean, you can try.
I mean, they do that in middle schools though. I mean, it is
Listen,
working in some school
I,
policy.
I'm not preaching, so I got some.
I'm just
difference here.
asking, like,
I've been trying to do that for 20 years.
I think the enforcement of it is
It is really
challenging.
hard to say no cell phones because they hide them. They have a second phone. It's crazy that they can text and not even look at their phone.
Talk to text.
Yeah, it's really struggle.
but then there's a consequence if you do it. Are we doing that now? I mean,
Well, I can't answer that because I'm not. in the
Yes, we
building.
need better policy enforcement.
that's what I'm saying. Right now, I feel like it's not, they're allowed to use them. So that's it. So we haven't even tried it, saying.
No, I'm not saying that. I don't know. I'm not, don't put words in my mouth. I don't know what exactly they're doing in enforcement, but I am sharing stories with you of where I know it fails. And when I was an assistant principal 20 years ago, I would confiscate the phone. That was our policy. It's a 2,000 plus student high school. And here's what happens. Parents are so reliant on that phone for their kid that I would say, your child can't have the phone, your son, your daughter can't have the phone, that you have to come get it. And I remember when I knew it was a losing battle, when mom came in and got the phone and the child was in my office and flipped it to him on the way out the door.
Then, like, send the kid home that day, I mean, institute stricter consequences.
Absolutely.
I think what you're trying to get at is before we go and purchase,
Spend
post some money on like a yonder pouch, why don't we look at the policy and see how we
It's a
can
policy. It's not a policy.
Or just-
issue. It's an enforcement.
enforcing, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
look at it and make it.
We don't have a policy right now that says you can't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do,
Yeah.
we do, yeah.
It's definitely.
It's not-
So the next thing.
Maybe it's like
is-
the dress code where we have to like bring it back to committee, revisit it and make sure that it fits today's scenario. And-
Well, I think too, admin,
Anyway, just
so that's a
totally
lot
different
of,
tangent.
it's just a lot of headaches even for them. I mean,
Well, I think the financial aspect makes sense. I get.
Well,
what
that's like.
Yeah, and the other thing to that is when you confiscate the phone, then the fight we run into is the cost of that phone and it belongs to them. So, I mean, and we can all do this, but we've got 3,000 kids in one high school, 2,800 kids in another, and, 11 administrators, 9 administrators trying to manage that. And I'm not saying we don't look at different ways to try to address it, but I'm just saying we have exhausted a lot of different,
That's
that's a
provided.
policy.
Anyway, sorry, that was a big tangent, but.
That's okay. That's okay. Good discussion. The next proviso has actually been ratified. It's on its way to the governor. This is S-245 for booster clubs, along with other things that the booster clubs need to do. One thing they're going to be required to do is to report their officers' names to school board by August 1st of each year. So we'll get back into the rhythm of getting that information from school booster clubs. And also the S-418 Read to Succeed has been ratified. So unfortunately, the requirements, not unfortunately, pardon me, they're expanding requirements for summer reading camps, but they're not providing additional monies for those additional.
Originally read it and it sounded like a good thing, but.
Okay, so funding impacts at ED2, what we know right now is unfortunately the state revenue projections, we didn't receive those. Lisa and I went to this South Carolina School Business Officials Conference last week, and we were hopeful that the State Department of Education was going to be able to provide the numbers, but they said, alas, no, next week. So we're hoping. Yes, maybe. We did, however, meet with, Lisa and I met with some county officials, and it looks like property tax revenues will go up for increased assessed values, not a tax increase, not a tax
Yeah.
increase. Assessed values of $8 million for additional property tax revenues. And the homestead exemption for tier 3 reimbursements, that's in place of Act 388, will go up $1.8 million. So just some high level numbers when we were doing some crunching of our numbers. For the proposed increase of teacher salary scale to $46,000, which would be $2,500 over where we are now. That's if the governor goes to 45,000 and we go 1,000 above, or if we go to the base minimum of 46, that'll cost $5.8 million for salaries and benefits for that increase. The proposed increase to 47,000, which is the current House Ways and Means, would be additional $3,500, $8.1 million. And then if we wanted to be $1,000 above the minimum as we are now, that would cost $10.4 million if we went to the 48,000. We have heard, I'm sure I'm saying this right, that we will receive a good bit of that increase as part of our state aid classrooms. Might hold our breath and see if that happens. So, but we see it, but that's what they told us. We'll be so excited that will happen. We'll try to go as high as we can with the dollars that we.
It's always the goal, right?
Pardon?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We're not withholding it.
No. Some areas of focus for Dorchester School District 2 for FY25 general fund budget. These were the top thing, of course, is teacher salary scales. Definitely want to make sure we work on that. Another thing that Dr. Robbins has wanted us to work on is the extracurricular stipends. So it's been quite a while since we've looked at various coaching stipends for even academic coaching.
Sponsors, clubs.
Yes.
I agree with that.
Well, that has been a concern in some of the sessions we've had.
Those are our teachers doing extra stuff.
Right.
That helps them. They do.
Well, one of the things I asked them to look at is, again, back to my bargaining days, is to put an index with it so that anytime the salary scale rises, it adjusts the ECA stipend schedules.
Once we get it.
Yeah,
Where it needs
once you get it where it needs to be, so. Go back, because what happens is people will look and they'll adjust the salary schedule and they'll forget about the ECA schedule and you'll go 10 years and it's not been modified or adjusted. This way they're, it's synchronous.
We'll have to look at what those ratios would be, the indices would be, because some of them, they don't make a lot of money. If it's a $600 coach. Or something
Yeah.
else that. Definitely on the plan for this year. Also additional FTEs due to growth in the instructional arena, instructional support, also in our operational. As Tony has pointed out, the zillions of square feet that we have in our district, and we haven't increased his FTEs in a long time for folks to help out. Also, Ms. Powell, as you're pointing out, a cost of living increase for non-teachers, not just the teachers, but non-teachers as well, because you get a step, but the COLA would be very beneficial. And also, one of the areas that we really wanted to focus on was maintaining the L-term assistance. We were able to pay for those from ESSER for a few years, and then we got a grant from DHEC. Both of those are ending for this new year. That we felt it was very important to continue them. All of those folks are really beneficial in the schools. There's a lot more, and Amanda can speak to this more than I can, but a lot more instances where the health-term assistance were needed.
The bookkeeper, the media specialist assistant. No, you're fine.
So,
What is that?
the secretary, so we wanted to look at the scales for the secretary scales, like we said, we hit
Or
the
you have-
teaching assistants, we also, the bookkeeper at the schools
Yeah.
and the systems.
Okay.
operators.
Do we have anything? Have we ever looked at the assistants, the media specialists? What, I don't know the technical term, but it. You had the right there. Yeah, media specialist assistant.
Just media assistants, like, like that, we have gotten several emails about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about moving in from T2 to T3 next year.
Just something I consider.
Okay, what's the average salary for a beginning custodial person and
Those were,
make
those
custodial.
were increased to $15 an hour
Okay,
last year.
and maintenance. Grounds and
Right.
all of them.
They don't work on our, we don't focus on them as an hourly rate with their salary.
they have, okay, the salary. Oh, just want to make sure everybody gets something because if you
Absolutely.
don't.
But we weren't able to implement the entire salary study. It was just gonna be too much, so we tried to hit on a few groups
Right.
last year. We'll try it again. a few groups
Did
this
you do
year.
anything with the starting salary for like a maintenance technician, or I don't know the technical term?
We did on last year.
What is their starting salary? Do you know? Starting salary for a maintenance technician or whatever their title is?
Really depends on, what school they work at, that they're on the M5 scale, on the M4 scale, depending on the school. If it's a two-school campus, they're at M5. And I think, if you look at this year's scales, I'm not sure of the actual dollar.
When you have time, if you give us a copy of what it might be, that would be great.
Is it online with the rest of the?
Yes, it is.
Sean, okay,
I'll have to take a look at it.
thank you.
I'll send you a link. Send you the link.
Another thing that I definitely wanted to go over really quickly, and then we have one other thing on the agenda too, is fund balance of our general fund budget. So, we've heard that there are some legislative folks who are looking at all the fund balance amounts for all the school districts. And they have brought up that their fund balances are really high.
Hmm.
Well, we have been held down for a long, long, long time by Act 593, which was repealed last year. So yay, thankfully. We were only able to have 15% of the fund balance. Over the past couple years, many school districts were able to save money in their general fund because we had the ESSER dollars. So we were trying to save up some of that money because we knew ESSER was going to be discontinued eventually. And so like when we're moving things from general fund back into, pardon me, from ESSER back into general fund, we need a little cushion there. So we wanted to build it up a little bit. So I just wanted to point out that our unassigned fund balance at the end of June 30th, 2023 was $64.3 million. As a percentage of our general fund budget, it is 24.1%. So the Government Finance Officers Association recommends you have a minimum of 2 months, which is 16.7%.
16.67.
When you said that like other districts were really high, like, are you talking like, what are you talking about? Their funds? This is where-
You know, when I left Kershaw County, we started at 13% with a goal of getting to 18%. And they consider that high. And Tina and I were talking today, and I'm like, look at our government entities, and they've got 35 and 40% cash. And even when you look at that 24%, we won't end the year at 24% because you've got incremental costs that come like every 6 months when we make bond payments, just when we receive revenue. And so it goes up and down, and then I'll get off my soapbox on that. My last thing is I always use the hyper, sensitive situation I experienced in my last district where we were hit by a tornado and had to rebuild a high school. And COVID hit and ESSER monies were spent and then be reimbursed for it. And if we didn't have a cash balance, we would have to do what some poor districts had to do. And they had to take out bonds to spend money for the state to reimburse them. So that's why it's really important for a district to have at least 2 to 2.5 months of cash on hand.
Cash flow management is definitely a big thing.
Yeah.
As Lisa was saying, she came from Charleston, hurricane. Well, actually here in Dorchester, when Hurricane Hugo, we got hit really hard in Somerville.
It's
I just wanted to emphasize that they say that's high, but that's really not. That's
It's not.
not high. Because, that's just being fiscally responsible. So.
most people don't remember back to 2008, 9, that time frame where we had the recession and the government didn't pay us. And so if we didn't have cash, we wouldn't have been able to make payroll. So, I've lived through, some of that. And
One of the things that they were trying to point out was that, why do you think you need more than 8% in your fund balance? Well, 8% is the state is when the State Department of Education comes in and says, you need somebody to look over your finances, you're on fiscal watch. So we don't ever want to be at 8%, but that was one of their items that, why would you be over that?
And
We don't want to be
again,
on fiscal.
it's like riding a wave, you know, it's not always at that level. It goes down and then it comes back up. So the reason why I like using the general fund cash flow report that Tina fills out is so we can look at what we kind of forecast where we're going to be budgeting for the, you know, the next fiscal.
We go below.
Yeah.
1%.
Yeah.
A lot of times, like you said, for cash flow versus our revenues that don't come in until January and February, we're using our fund balance, so we don't have to get tax anticipation. It's critical. I just wanted to tell you all that in case you hear some chatter about, it won't be that much. for your time. We do. District budget meetings. So today we're having our school board budget workshop. Next time we meet, typically we have the big meeting at the end of March where we give a lot of numbers. You'll see a lot of revenues, a lot of expenditure requests, but we'll be on spring break at that time. So we'll come back that next. Yeah, come back that first meeting in April and present all of those numbers. Hopefully we'll have some good numbers from the state. Be able to say solidly, yes, we're going to $48,000 at least.
I know you have one more thing, but before you segue into that, I was talking to Tina about this just before the meeting, about having like something online. I think I talked to you about it, like an FAQ for our teachers, because I feel like I still get a lot of questions about like, how can other districts tell us what they're gonna pay for next year? Why can they, like all these different things, so just like a finance FAQ for our teachers that you can link in like a newsletter to our teachers. So like if you send out a newsletter district-wide to staff, it can be like, hey, if you have questions about where the board is or why we're limited to certain things, like we don't have fiscal autonomy. So other districts may be able to make that promise because they could increase taxes. We can't, you know, like various things explaining that and just point, because not everybody watches a board meeting, maybe. I don't know. I know we like, I feel like she's said a lot over the years, but I still do get a lot of like similar confusion and questions. So just having like a landing page to be proactive with, hey, let me point you in this direction. And if this doesn't answer your questions, then,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wise to do. I would also say that, you know, not everything you read with other districts is factual.
Well, yeah.
You know, because they say they're doing certain things, that doesn't mean that they actually have done them, right?
And I think that's really important to notate, and I think it just
And then,
creates confusion and like, you know, like, well, why aren't they doing it? So I think it'd be really nice to just proactively communicate some of these things. And then if they still have concern like questions, then maybe that will help limit them.
the fiscal autonomy, this one is confusing to people. I was looking at a budget presentation in another school district that has fiscal autonomy. And they go in and they tell you, we're raising X amount of mills. And, you know, and what that'll equate to financially. We do not have the authority in our community to do that. So
That would be like a
Yeah.
finance tab, like FAQs or something, and then we can just point to it in our newsletter. That was my only 2 cents.
yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah, I thought when I looked at their budget presentation, it looked like, wow, they're telling you what they're doing.
Yes, so Charleston
Yeah,
has it.
Lexington one, I looked at, Lee has it.
Right, but it would be neat, so when I even feel those questions, I can be like, hey, here's a link to like a landing page on our website. This answers a lot of like common questions we get about our funding formula, about why we have to wait until we can approve the budget, you know what I mean? Like what we're waiting on legislatively, and that could just, you know, point them there, and like, if you still have more questions, like, please come back to me, but I get a lot too as a board member, so it'd be helpful to just have something to point them to, you know?
This would be helpful right here, this one page that shows what districts have what.
I'm like big on like communicate it right
I
away.
think one thing that Ms. Bates pointed out was just because we say we don't have fiscal autonomy in Act 388 has really hurt us. What does that even mean?
People don't understand, oh yeah, that's what I was telling her, is like, I didn't really understand that impact until I really like heard it 18,000 times and researched like, what does that mean? So like, what does that mean for them and why does that affect them? And like explain that a little bit more so people understand it, because I think once they understand it, they'll realize that maybe it's not like we're choosing out of, it's a choice for us not to be able to do some of the things that we're unable to do.
There's 83 school districts in South Carolina, only 20 of them have no authority.
So any questions? I think we've been asking questions as we go.
Sorry.
Anybody? No, it's perfectly great. I think it's great. Good conversation. Did anybody have any other? any questions? Mr. Guthrie?
Budget outlook, I guess that's the next point of I already did that.
So, yeah, that was part of, the next part is just, working to get our additional information from the schools and the departments and working with leadership. And, we'll probably present to y'all all of the needs that are coming to us. And then, Dr. Robbins, one of his, duties is to present y'all with a balanced budget. That's gonna be difficult. But we'll show you the big picture of what the needs are and then what we'll be able to fund. That's where we'll need y'all's input to say, we know what we should probably go with this.
So I know this is like for you all, this is a real high level, but we have a bunch of meetings. We've been meeting for several weeks with the academic team and our principals and looking at what allocations they need for the upcoming year and where that and Lori's team puts together the total number of elementary teachers we have, middle school, high school teachers and, the total max gross number is not based on, adding up individual schools because some have a decline and some have an addition. So that gives us our total allocation request. It's based on that and enrollment, obviously, and maintaining the one focus the board has always had, and that is to maintain student teacher ratios. So they've been working really hard on that. I've been in some meetings with them and we're pretty close.
And reputation for auditing services.
Yes, so, we had a committee meet. Asked for requests for proposals from audit firms. There's a board policy that says that every 5 years we are to switch auditors. So we were at the end of our 5 years. So there were some firms that responded. This request was to go with a certain firm. I want to say in public right now because it's confidential information until we are able to enter into a contract with them. But it was loaded into your board packets under the confidential area.
Yeah.
Yes. But I did bring a copy of it if anybody would like to see that. We weren't able to get into board docs because there was some issues today with it was not working, it was not online. But we'll need the board to approve the actual auditor. This is for start with FY 24 budget, so there'll be fiscal year. So July 1, 23 through June 30, 24 is when they're actually going to this budget year. Maybe for, yeah. It's for our financial audit and our. It's a pleasure. Please vote on that tonight and we can get them in place and work with our new auditors.
Because they'll start collecting information pretty quick.
Awesome.
And that was actually a recommendation from the committee to Dr. Robbins and Dr. Robbins to y'all.
I have worked with this audit.
Anything else? Anybody else have any questions or anything else from the finance committee?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Jared.
Thank you all very much.